All right. So you see the thumbnail, you see the title. Let's go ahead and jump right into it to ask the question, to answer the question whether now is a good time to buy or should you actually wait. So let's go ahead, jump right into point number one here, which is likely you are buying at the top. And one thing I do want to show you is that yes, you would be buying at the top, but if you look at real estate prices over, let's say over the last 50 100 years, is you will be fine in the interim, because naturally what does happen, and this is partly due to inflation, that it goes up and to the right. But the thing is, by you buying at the top or at the near top, is if you can weather the storm in the event a downturn does happen, which in certain, let's say residential, for instance, is there is starting to be a slowdown and starting to shift to more of a buyer's market, not entirely to a buyer's market, but it is still a seller's market, but it's slowly starting to soften out there. And properties, home prices, homes that would formerly is the agent would go to their buyer and say, hey, you've got to put a price over asking, and then the competition would be high because there would be multiple parties that are also bidding above and beyond the asking, and then the properties would sit longer. But one thing I've seen, and there's a property just right across the street from me that's just been sitting there for a while, and it's been listed, and the grass hasn't been cut, but that just goes to show you that properties are sitting a little bit longer, and the demand hasn't been there as it formerly has been. So this is what I wanted to show you. Just this graph in particular is let me go ahead and zoom in. So this is the housing price index since 1990. And what this essentially goes into is that the housing price index is a measure, let's zoom in here for you, is a measure designed to capture changes in the value of single family houses in the US as a whole, in various regions and in smaller areas. And of course, everyone who's on here, don't forget to like the video, especially if you're getting value from this. Let's go ahead and proceed. So this is what real estate looks like over time. However, as you see that there is dips in between this, and this is one of the things that Ray Dalio actually talks about, is there's always going to be cycles. Is yes, things are going to go on the up and up, but at some point is it's going to end up experiencing a downturn. So depending on where you buy, is that if you're buying at the top and you're not able to weather the storm when things do hit that bottom, let's say you need to sell the property for whatever reason, that's where you could end up getting yourself in trouble. So that's one thing I want to mention, is that buying at the top is that in the event you need to get out of the property for whatever reason, or let's say you need to refinance and they go to reassess the property, then you're not able to get as much debt as you originally thought to be able to now cash yourself out. So those are just some things to take into consideration when you're buying at this moment. And I would say is yes, still now is a good time to buy. However, you just have to stick to certain fundamentals and just not get in the whole craziness when it comes to people that are buying properties. And one thing I want to mention for everyone on here, go ahead and comment below whether or not you are still buying at this moment, or are you just waiting to hold off and see where things end up shaking out. So that's the first and foremost point that I want to mention there. And then in addition to that is I want to go into a story of just investors that I've spoken with that have been through the downturn during the 07, 08, 2009 time, is that they ended up having to give the properties back to the bank because they were over purchasing, overpaying for properties, and then they were not able to weather the storm when things ended up having a downturn. So one of the things is just learning from others' mistakes, because what they say is that history doesn't exactly repeat itself, but it does rhyme. So that's one thing, is just learning from mistakes. That way you can avoid those mistakes and end up carving another path. So that's first and foremost there. And let's go ahead and go into the next one during these times that we're in is that, and many say that we're due for an upcoming recession. My personal opinion is that we're already in a recession, and just due to that is a lot of times they say that when people say it's actually a recession, they quote unquote call and say now we're in a recession. We're actually at the tail end of the recession on that. So this is what I wanted to mention is that sticking to the fundamentals. And what that means is as long as you're buying right, financing right, and you're buying in good to great locations and you're managing right. So those are the four fundamentals that you want to have. And what this means by buying right is you're not banking on appreciation. And that's where a lot of people end up getting caught, especially when you're in California and you're buying a property, you're buying a property and for investment purposes, and you're only just going to say, well, I'm going to make my profit once this appreciates, and you're in a negative cash flow standpoint and you're having to service that out of pocket, and you would make your profit once you sell the property, and you're just assuming that things are going to keep going up. That is a huge no-no. Let me go ahead and say that again. Is not banking on appreciation. That is where a lot of people end up getting caught up because, and this is my experience share learning from others, is that if you're buying near at the top, you're buying near at the top, and then you're assuming that property is going to keep going up, and you're making a buying decision based upon that, and that ends up not working out, and you're still in a negative cash flow situation, then that's where you could end up getting yourself caught. And this whole time you may not be able to service that debt because you're not able to keep that property going because you're constantly having to pay out of pocket. Then that's when you have to actually give the property back to the bank if you have on debt, or that you have to sell it and take a haircut. Yes, you do not want to take a haircut in this case and then have to show up to the closing. And in order for you to sell the property, that you actually have to bring money to the closing table in order to have that happen. And I've experienced that buying properties from other investors. So that's when it comes to buying right. The next that you want to have is to finance right. And what that is that not putting too much debt onto your property. All right, here we go. And at towards the end, I'll go ahead and drop some questions that are people have. We've got LinkedIn user here, which is an interesting name. Curious where you're from with the name LinkedIn user, but just kidding on that. So just going back to this is that financing right is not putting too much debt onto the property. And what this means by putting too much debt is I would say anything over 70% loan to value. So what this means is if you are buying a property for $100,000, then you wouldn't want to put any more than $70,000 debt onto the property. Some people even leverage the people that really ended up getting in trouble was doing 100% financing, but just anything above and beyond that is where you could end up, because now you've got more debt on the property. And let's say this is a rental as an example, is that let's say rents pull back, but you still have that higher debt payment that you're not able to service because let's say now you don't have enough income coming in. So that's just one thing you have to consider is putting lower debt onto the property. That way in the future, that in the event the rents pull back or let's say tenants aren't able to pay rent because just the environment that we're in, you're going to have some slow payers in that case, is that you're still not on the hook for that higher debt payment. So conservatively, you would want to be anywhere between 60 to 70 is still even on the high end at times, but being lower than 70% is good. But then the flip side of this is that when you put more debt onto the property, your returns don't look as good on your money. But it just comes down to, it's really a catch-22. Because when you put more debt onto the property, of course, is that you have a higher return, but now that's even more risk because it's a higher debt payment, but now you've got less cash in. So now you've got that good return on the less money that you have in there versus if you put bring more money to the table, your return on investment is going to be a little bit lower in that case, but there's less risk with that. So that's just one thing you have to take into consideration. And me studying others that are further along than me, because I still make mistakes even to this day. But one of the things I learned from people is to not over leverage. Let me go ahead and say that again. To not over leverage your property. That is the common mistake that people end up making. I just listen for those mistakes and like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and avoid that one. So there's that. When it comes to the fundamentals, the next here is buying in good to great locations. And this is very key. With this is what I mean by buying in good to great locations is not buying in the hood. I grew up in the hood. I understand what goes on there. And it's just one of those things is that you got high crime, you got a high amount of turnover, and then many of the people that live there actually don't want to live there. The schools aren't the best. And you've got high risk for vandalism. So I've had this happen, and also others I've helped coach along their journey as far as investors is that they had bought properties in not so good areas, and yes, it looks good on paper, but it's just more risk with that. And the property ends up going vacant. Someone ends up breaking into the property and then, let's say, stealing the furnace, stealing the copper, and now you're out of even more money. So that's one thing. And this was a conversation I had with a recent investor that was in California, and they had bought a property in Indianapolis that was in the hood. And they said that, I don't know what it is about this property. It was a duplex. And they mentioned, I don't know what it is. I'm just not able to get the other side rented. I'm having a lot of difficulties with this. And I said, well, you bought a property in the hood. That's first and foremost. So, and that was their reaction afterwards. No, it really wasn't that deep. But that's just one of the things is when you're buying in the hood or the not so good areas is, yes, it looks better. It looks good on paper, but there's just more risk with that. And the actual execution is even more difficult. And if you're buying something that's and you're an out-of-state investor, that's even more risk because now you're having to rely even more on the property management company and your boots on the ground. And this is one really good source that you can actually use to figure out whether or not somewhere is good to buy as far as determining what the crime is. Trulia did have this map that was actually really good when it came down to crime, because you would be able to assess and see that, okay, there's a high concentration of crime in this part of town, and that's usually a good indicator. And for instance, on the east side of Indianapolis, which is where I ended up growing up, is that there's a high concentration on crime that's there. And that's usually, again, a good indication when you're identifying a market to invest in, the areas to not invest in, or if you're going for those type of properties, then that would be areas to invest in. So let's say here we type on, let's say Lawrence, Indiana, for instance. All right. So you can go here and you can look at here, crime rates. Lawrence crime rates are 70% higher than the Indiana average. So you can dig a little bit further into this, and then you can also use a site such as spotcrime.com. So this is another source. Oops, I spelled that wrong. Spot. That's definitely, all right, come on now, spot crime. Yes, so spot crime is another source that you can use in order to determine what type of crime is there. Because if you've got small petty crime, let's say crime near me. Oops, no, I'm actually not going to do that. You'll know exactly where I am. Don't want you guys, yeah, you get where I'm going with that. All right, spot crime, and then let's go Houston, Texas. All right, so mark location. So you want to see the type of crime. So if it's a bunch of, let's say, breaking into cars or small vandalism of that, let's say we got this walking blue man that's right here. All right, we got some theft. But if it's more violent crimes, such as someone actually taking someone's life, then that would be something you want to consider is like, I actually I would avoid wanting to invest there. So those are just some factors that you want to consider. And then the last but not least point is to manage right. So having good managing a property right, managing a property can really make or break a deal. So through good management, well, through bad management, you can actually take a good deal and make it bad, and through good management, you can actually turn around a property. So those are just some factors when it comes to the fundamentals. And as mentioned, everyone, go ahead and comment below if you haven't already with whether or not you are still buying or you are placing things on hold at this moment in time. So there's that. All right. And let's go ahead and switch this. And then the last but not least points that we have here for you. Let's go ahead and shift that. All right. Is to avoid common mistakes when it comes to just seeing what others have done and understanding, okay, this is what they've done, and then this was a common mistake that ended up wiping a lot of people out. I'm going to go ahead and go this route. So during this time, as I mentioned, is that you're still determining, should I wait or should I still buy? Is now you have that question. Is now the next steps is, okay, during this time when we were at the height of the market, what did others do? And then from there is, okay, these are the common mistakes they ended up making. And then for those who did end up buying near the top, how did they end up weathering the storm for when we did end up having a downturn? So, but overall, when it comes to real estate, the graph that I showed earlier it is up and to the right. You just have to be able to weather the storm during the times where it does end up going down. So that's all I have for you all today. Let's go ahead and go to some facts here. All right. And so this question again by very unique name, LinkedIn user. I'd like to buy in Indiana, but with seller financing, good time. Yes. However, if you can find someone who is motivated enough to want to consider seller financing, then by all means, go that route. That works in your favor. But someone may not be willing to do that, where they can just go with someone who has a cash offer for the same price, or maybe even more than what you're willing to do it for seller financing. Because a lot of the sellers' expectations right now still is very sky high. So those are the things you just have to take into consideration. But yes, it's always a good time to do seller financing as long as the terms work out in your favor and it makes sense on the numbers. And we've got Teresa here that says still buying. Awesome. So, all right, that's all we have today. Appreciate everyone so much. I will see you on the next stream. And don't forget to like and also comment below. I enjoy hearing from each and one of you. And I personally respond to each and every message. So, all right, I'll see you next time.